of pepper,
okay.
Which is also doing very well, and there are plans to do a whole lot more.
Okay.
And agric is something that we are all interested in.
Yeah.
And I must tell viewers that you are also a snail farmer.
Did you have to say, do this to me? Yeah.
So it is.
And I'm into floristry.
Yes, it is the farmers' conference.
Yes, this is a farmers conference today. Well, we'll try as much as possible to make it very interesting, because a lot of people say, oh, agriculture is not sexy enough. But agriculture, when done properly, when a country concentrates on agriculture, it can get a lot of revenue and really build the economy. So very important sector it is. So Kojo, let's start and see what the NDC has with this sector. I want you to, first of all, before we go to the nitty-gritty, to give us a general idea of what they have in that document on agriculture. Then we look at the various issues.
Well, the NDC's agric plan, as captured in their manifesto, is from page 45 onwards. That's where they give us the details about what they want to do in agric. And they say that agric remains the backbone of the Ghanaian economy.
Okay.
And that the NDC implemented several programs and initiatives to enhance agric, including irrigation, mechanization, credit facilities, incentives to farmers and fishermen, among others.
Okay.
And they write that the potential of the sector has not been fully harnessed, thereby contributing less to economic growth. So the NDC government will reposition agric and agribusiness as a key driver for Ghana's economic growth and development, establish a Cashew development board to coordinate cashew-related issues, use coordinated strategies and investments in agric and agribusiness to secure livelihoods and increase prosperity for all Ghanaians, and set agric as the central focus of the economic policy. Okay. Let me repeat this. They want to set agric as the central focus of the economic policy by using agric as a tool to contribute to managing the exchange rate, increasing direct budget expenditure on agric as a share of total budget expenditure from the present 7% to at least 10%, doubling the value of domestic and intra-regional and global export demand in agric services, commodities and manufactured products, taking advantage of emerging opportunities in ECOWAS and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to expand our market, and also to enhance foreign direct investment and domestic direct investment in agric and agribusiness. And they go on and on and on. Now, there's also the point about attracting 30% of school leavers into primary agriculture and agribusiness entrepreneurship by providing agronomic and extension services and operationalizing 60,000 hectares of year-supported commercial farms across the districts. They talk about TVET. Yesterday we were talking about education and TVET, collaborating with TVET institutions to activate agric-related entrepreneurship training and skills development, and also incentivize the financial sector to devote a sizable amount of credit to primary agriculture and agribusiness.
So the issue of getting investors and the funding, which is a big issue.
Which is a really big issue. When we did the City Business Festival, we had a whole forum on agric, and all the key topics was financing agriculture. And the responses that we got from a lot of people suggested that still people have a problem with understanding agric financing and also getting financing for agric. And the NDC says that they are going to ensure that they incentivize the financial sector to devote a sizable amount of credit to primary agric and agribusiness. Now, they also talk about restructuring rural credit and the Ghana Exim Bank to improve credit to strategic agribusiness activities and related infrastructure, and minimize the credit risks to agric and agribusiness sector, reduce the cost of credit, and improve the security required for accessing credit. There's a lot more on agric. Let me give you some more. Point H under agric says align infrastructure development to key agro-productive zones by developing the agro-productive zones and align appropriate infrastructure to facilitate agric and agribusiness using PPP. Establish agro-industrial parks to support backward and forward linkage industries. Rehabilitating and modernizing transport systems in agri-commodity producing areas. And increasing access to utility services in the agric production and processing zones.
So better infrastructure, better utility supply to these agric-prone areas.
Yeah, and they have a subsection which talks about priority national crop commodities. So they are talking about cereal crops such as maize, rice, sorghum, and millets. They are talking about yam, plantain, cassava, sweet potato, and cocoyam, tomato, pepper, and okra. And they want to work with stakeholders to develop reliable markets for tree crops, that is cocoa, shea nut, oil palm, cashew, and coconut, industrial crops, that is rubber, coconut, and jute, and fruit crops, pineapple, mango, citrus, and watermelon. And they are saying that they want us to be food sufficient in the key priority cereal area and vegetable and legume area, and also the starchy staples.
Okay, so we'll go into the details of quite a lot on the agri sector and quite detailed. So we'll pick one by one. But before that, I want us to go to ex-President Mahama during the launch of the manifesto, where he also spoke about key points around the agri sector and see what some of the things he spoke about, and then we'll look at that in particular before we go to the details. So if we can, let's take the video from ex-President Mahama on their plans for the agri sector if they should win power come 2020 December.
Under the Ghana Framework for Industrial Revitalization, Support and Transformation, which we call Ghana First, we will boost the real sector of the economy, and the 16 strategic growth areas are going to be agriculture and agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, health tourism, light manufacturing, including apparels, accessories and assemblages, educational service exports, financial services, furniture, ICT business services and logistics, oil and gas petroleum sector, strategic minerals including salt, tourism, tree crop development, coastal landscape and forest management, afforestation, infrastructure, construction, waste management and recycling, and high-tech manufacturing, including chemicals. To stimulate economic growth and create opportunities for sustainable jobs through agri-business, we will realign the Ministry of Food and Agriculture into a Ministry of Agriculture and Agribusiness. This is to capture the full value chain, because we've concentrated only on production, and when we have produced, we don't have the capacity to process the produce and make them available to the market. We'll put Ghana on the path of self-sufficiency in the production of commodities and also for exports. We'll delineate agro-production and processing zones for medium to large-scale production. These include examples like Brong-Ahafo is the leading producer of cashew nuts, but yet we don't have an active cashew processing capacity in Brong-Ahafo. And so we'll put that in. There are places that are good at ginger production. We'll process the ginger into ginger powder, ginger oil for export. There are places that are producing rice. We'll put rice milling equipment so that we can mill the rice for the local market and, if possible, for export. Provide micro-processing equipment to farmers, to farmer cooperatives. For instance, in the palm oil growing area, if you give a group of farmers, a cooperative, a small processing mill to be able to process their palm oil for the market, it will add value to what they are doing. In the cocoa sector, cocoa processing for value addition will ensure the processing of at least 50% of our cocoa beans locally before we export. We'll restore the distribution of fertilizer inputs and free fertilizer inputs and seedlings to cocoa farmers. Support small cocoa processing companies and artisanal cocoa products, process and market finished and semi-finished cocoa products, in addition to raw cocoa beans, amongst many others.
So that's ex-President Mahama picking some highlights on the manifesto, 2020 manifesto for the NDC on agriculture. One thing that caught my attention, actually three things, but let me start with this, on what he just spoke about, is the realignment of the ministry from the Ministry of Agriculture to Ministry of Agriculture and Agribusiness, saying that we need to now look at the funding, the marketing and all that.
Yeah, so based on the conversations we've had on this show, Ministry of Transport is going to be realigned. If you remember, he said that he's going to merge Ministry of Railways, Ports, and all those things into one Ministry of Transport. So that's one realignment. Now, Ministry of Agric is now going to be Ministry of Agric and Agribusiness.
Yes.
And he mentions financing, production, processing, marketing, value chain development, and he gave examples. Now, this is something that, if you look at the data, excuse me, if you look at the data and opportunities within the agribusiness space, Ghana has consistently failed in doing that. For example, let's take cocoa. At a point where the world's largest producer of cocoa. Now we are the second largest producer of cocoa. Meanwhile, value addition in Ghana is relatively very low. There are so many value chains along the cocoa sector that we've not developed. And our ministries of agric over the years have been production-led. Oh, let's produce more maize. Let's see to a higher production of cocoa. High yields. We've not really put in place structures to create value chains from all the various SKUs
was it a challenge, or was it deliberate, or we lost track in our planning as a sector?
I think it's all to do with the planning, the vision and execution. Because usually we talk about industrial development, forgetting that agric is one of the main providers of raw material for industry. So if you are talking about industrial development, we should be able to link it to agric such that raw materials available in certain areas should drive production. So if I can give you an example of what is happening currently. Now, this current government is doing 1D, 1F. And so they try to position certain processing factories in certain areas that they can have raw material, which will then ensure that farmers in those areas will have ready off-takers. Now, people in those areas will get jobs, and those jobs will create a microeconomy within that particular area that will support people's livelihoods. So this is something we've largely failed at doing since independence. After independence, we managed to do a few things. So there was a juice factory, we had the shoe factory, which was supposed to, we had different kind of, back then we had the big takrady flour mills and lots of big industry doing lots of wonders. But we lost out. At the moment, if you look at Ghana, we even import a lot of crude palm oil, something that we used to be a world leader when it comes to production of palm oil. For example, if you look at the global production of roots and tubers, that is the yams, the cassavas, the potatoes and everything, China is number 1. In Africa, Nigeria is number 1, Ghana is number 2. Top 10 in the world, Ghana is number 7. But when it comes to these potato chips businesses and all these things and all these new food chains here, ask them where they get their inputs from.
From outside.
So these are some of the key opportunities that are available to us as a country. And listening to him, he says they want to reposition agric or realign the Ministry of Agric as Ministry of Agric and Agribusiness to look at financing, production, processing, marketing, value chain development, which should be welcome news to the sector if it's done. Execution is done. If execution is done. So that's a key thing that he's mentioned that sticks out for agric.
Okay. Free fertilizer. Free fertilizer. When the NPP came, they cancelled it. You pay 50% of the cost and then they let you have it. There were issues with smuggling, issues with funding itself and all that. The NDC is saying when they come back, they are going back to the original plan of free fertilizer.
Now, they didn't even just say free fertilizer alone. They also say that they are going to ensure that we do local fertilizer production. There's a portion under there.
That's right. That's right.
So there's the NDC government to continue to provide free agro inputs, fertilizer, insecticides, fungicides, and extension services to all cocoa farmers. Cocoa farmers. And the NDC government will support local companies to formulate and produce fertilizers locally to create more jobs and make fertilizers available and affordable. If you look at our budgets over the years, there's always the mention of free fertilizer, the fertilizer subsidy program. And we import a lot of fertilizers into the country. The past few years, we've seen an improvement in fertilizer blending in the country. And environmentalists and people in the space are saying that there are so many opportunities for us to even convert waste into fertilizer. Now, the issue of fertilizer subsidy and free fertilizer has been something that watchers of the industry have been concerned about over the years. Because whereas we use the taxpayers' money to buy a lot of fertilizer for the sector, we end up hearing stories of farmers not getting enough fertilizers, one, and number two, sometimes there are cabals that manage to get their hands on the fertilizers and sell to farmers. And number three, fertilizer in Ghana that is smuggled across our borders to be sold. So even though you and I, our money is going into those things, we are not getting the full results that we need to get from that. So NPP is promising things in that particular regard. If you look at the Planting for Food and Jobs, the Planting for Food and Jobs is about 3.8 billion Ghana cedi project.
Yeah.
There's a fertilizer component. There's a seed and agro input component. There's the extension officers component. There's the agri mechanization component. All these things are things that we try to do, but in a lot of instances, we do not implement or execute very well. So even though, let's say if you are putting 100 tons of fertilizer into the maize industry and it's supposed to get us this much, we don't get that much.
Right.
And so it's something that is being promised left to right, but it's something we have to police. The free fertilizer also doesn't mean that we go outside to import. If we are going to deliver free fertilizer to our farmers, we need to immediately have a strategy of making that fertilizer business a local content business, where local businesses are the ones blending the fertilizer. Like Glowfert is blending fertilizer close to in some and other companies are blending fertilizer, so that we create jobs here and create value. And also, we need to look at waste. If you look at the breakdown of waste, organic waste component of our general waste production, if we invested in that very well, we could have a lot more composts or organic fertilizer that we've converted from our waste to, one, save the environment and clear the field, and two, to give us a sustainable way of supplying free fertilizer, if that is what we want to do to our farmers, and also to support how rich our soils will be, because studies are showing that our soils are being degraded at a very fast rate because we are not supporting the reconsolidation, if that's a proper word, of our soils.
Okay.
So we've been importing a lot of the inorganic fertilizers, and now we should have a strategy to convert waste also into organic fertilizer to support. So that is one thing that they've mentioned that they will do.
Okay. I think now we can move to other issues. I don't know whether we should start from...
There's something that stuck out in their presentation, in the NDC presentation, that at least 10% of our budget is going to be dedicated to agric. 10% of our budget.
So what's the current we have?
Currently, we are doing about 7%.
Okay.
Now, Vivian, if you look at the contribution of agric to GDP, at the Malabo Convention, African leaders in 2014 agreed that at least 10% of our budgets will be committed to agric, so that agric will contribute at least 6% to GDP. We've not been able to do that yet. And we've not seen that heavy jump in the growth of agric, even though we are seeing some key gains recently. But if you look at the agric production figures consistently over the years and the amount of money we have to push in, we've not done that. So, for example, the agric sector share of national expenditure in 2012 was 5.8%. 2013, it went up to 7.5%, came down to 6.5%, and then it came to 6.4% in 2015, and then we hit about 7%. Our target should be 10%, so that agric growth and contribution to GDP will also rise accordingly. Now, let me give you some figures as to how agric has contributed to GDP. In 2011, we were at 0.8%. That's the GDP growth rate. 2012 was 2.3%. 2013 was 5.7%. 2014 was 4.6%.
Dropped.
2015, 2.8%. 2016, 3.0%.
Wow.
Now, the provisional figure as at April 2018 from the Statistical Service is 8.4%.
Okay.
Now, if you look at crops, livestock, and fishing, the crop space has been at 5.1, 5.2, and a constant 5.3 throughout. The livestock space, forgive me, 5.1, 5.2, constant 5.3 throughout. It shows that it's either we are not investing in livestock or we are not investing right. That's why there's a lot of meat importation into the country.
Because most of our poultry is from outside. We've had the poultry farmers complain forever.
Beef, pork, all sorts of things.
All that are important.
And if you look around us, they are from countries that do not have the resources even to support the growth that they are seeing, but they are growing. Burkina Faso, Niger, All these countries we are.
But why have we struggled for what you've seen? Why have we struggled over the years to deal with this issue of livestock? Because it's been happening for like ever. I was just telling one of the reporters on Business Desk that when I was doing business news, poultry farmers were crying. Fast forward to years later, they are still complaining. Why are we having challenges in dealing with this?
Livestock has primarily been a food issue, feed issue. So one of the highest cost centers for livestock is feed. So if you're not producing enough cereals and enough raw material to feed the livestock, you cannot feed the animals. And so their feed cost is so high. So we need to pay attention to all these cereals, the maize, the whatever, wheat and all those things we used to. And then when it comes to things like cattle and related livestock, fodder, we are not protecting their feed sources very well, and we are not investing in fodder banks. So we see the issue of Fulani herdsmen. So people who own livestock will get herdsmen to take them, and they move from one place to other in search of vegetation. But every proper country, even Canada and all these countries which have very little sunshine and you get a lot of winter and snow, they still have strategies where they grow enough feed to feed their livestock so that they can produce enough livestock for their countries and also for exports. But Ghana, with all the resources we've had, since 2011, we've not seen any proper growth rates of the sector.
That sector.
If you look at crops, 2011, 3.7. 2012, 0.8, 2013, 5.9, 2014, 5.7, 2015, 2.5, 2016, 2.5. Now, if this is the trend, how would you get enough to feed the humans?
And then
enough
think
to
of
feed
the animals.
For example, we import so much rice into this country. Our maize production for now has been very stable, and we are producing enough for the population. But we've not produced enough to have so much extra to feed the poultry industry. And we've not also invested in the technology to help us optimize whatever we get. So when it comes to storage, over the years we've not invested in warehouses. So farmers produce, they rot. Now we are investing in warehouses, one district, one warehouse. But we need to speed up that investment to ensure that when you harvest as a farmer, you get enough storage space to store your stuff and post-harvest technology so that you don't run at a loss and you have food all year round. Okay,
so if you look at under poultry and livestock, they have given them a very elaborate plan on how they intend to address some of the issues you've raised. For example, on the issue of the fodder, whatever, they are saying they'll push and improve the hay and fodder banks to support ranching of cattle, to reduce the perennial conflict between crop farmers and the Fulani herdsmen. They are also talking about rehabilitating and upgrading the Turaku and Mayanka livestock markets in Ashaman and Kumasi to reflect their international market status. Also, they are talking about liaising with the appropriate centers of excellence, CSIR Animal Research Institute, to develop clusters of standard housing that can hold a minimum of 50 birds, for example, at a time. And then poultry, establish processing plants to serve clusters of small poultry farms to process and package dressed birds and eggs for the market, and on and on and on. What do you think about some of the things they want to put in place to deal with the deficits you're telling us about and some of these challenges?
Let's start from point one.
Yes.
The bit about addressing the huge gap between national poultry meat consumption and supply. It will be great for the government to give us a proper roadmap, the strategy, because these things have been said over the years. We'll address the huge gap, we'll do this. What incentives do we have for the market? What strategy do we have to meet the needs of the market? Now, if local poultry farmers are also producing, what are we going to do to address the issue of the poultry import cabal, who also imports all sorts of birds into the country? I think just saying this is great on the surface, but we need an actionable plan which will give the poultry farmers the assurance that they can go all out and reinvest in the industry.
Okay.
If you go to the Doma area, poultry is big. If you go to the areas between Insahom and Suhum, there are new investments coming into poultry, with farms having 40,000 birds. You go to Akrup Farms, huge poultry farm. You go to Kumasi, there used to be Daku farms, there used to be Afari farms, there used to be Infum farms, Akati farms. All these farms have invested a lot of money in the business, but at a point, the business wasn't favorable to them because their cost producing locally was so high. And the import cabal were also having their field day doing business. So we need to address the huge gap, and it's been stated, but how to do it and how to create that environment for the local investment in the industry to thrive. We need a clear roadmap on that, so that it will give people the confidence to go into that particular business.
So you are looking at the house, the implementation,
yes,
the real
because
house.
We've heard a lot of these. If we go into the previous manifestos and we compare manifestos of the various parties, we see grand plans, but the house and timelines. Because, for example, we know that within a year, when you start a poultry farm, right, within a year, if you are doing layers, you keep your layers, they will grow and layer for a very long time, and usually around Christmas they let them go, or Easter. We know the growth period of poultry. We know the production period for maize and the various inputs. So if you want to do this, I think the leaders and the parties should give us specific time. So in the first 6 months of our government, we will invest this much in maize or this production so that we increase our maize production to this, to meet the expected demand of the poultry industry by this. You see those kind of things. Once we put those things down, I will be confident enough to go into poultry because I know that there will be enough feed, or a big chunk of my problems will be taken away. But just saying this and not giving us timelines will not help us to confidently invest in the particular industry.
Okay. Cash crops. I want us to start with cashew because they intend to establish a cashew development board, which is something those in the industry you've been pushing for, right? So let's start with cashew, then later we can go into cocoa production. What are the challenges with cashew that should be addressed to improve that industry?
Cocoa Board has been the regulator or the business controller of the cocoa space, enabling growth. So if you're a cocoa farmer, you know that every year Cocoa Board will set the prices. You know that Cocoa Board is coordinating the input and the support for cocoa farmers. You know there is this cocoa shed that you can go and sell, and these are the standards. There's traceability in the cocoa industry. So there's a structure in the cocoa industry. There are some concerns that farmers have and the industry has, but there's an established structure that has seen to the industry thriving. There's no proper structure for the cashew industry, and even some of the other tree crops. So for the tree crops, there's cashew, there's shea, there's coffee, there are all these things coming up. But there's not an established structure like that for cocoa. We've seen
cashew.
No, the cocoa has a structure, but the others don't have a structure. The NPP government has the tree crop development bill, which they are working on. But industry watchers are also saying that it's taking a bit too long for us to push this through. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, cashew farmers were selling a kilo of cashew for about 8 cedis or 9 cedis, if I remember the price very well. Now a kilo is probably going for 3 cedis, 4 cedis, 5 cedis. So the price just drops. And your production per kilo is about 2 or 2 cedis, 50 pesos. So in the end, your margins are very slim. And the amount of energy and the work you put into the work, you don't get the returns back. So it's made a lot of people a bit jittery about the cashew industry, because when we promoted cashew, it was the next cocoa. So people were very happy and people invested. But price assurance, if that is the right word to use, has not been something the cocoa farmers have had. Consider what this government has done with the government of Ivory Coast for cocoa, working together as the 2 largest producers of cocoa to set the price on the international stage, to say that we'll not let the market dictate the price to us. It's put some good money and some smiles on the faces of cocoa farmers. Cashew farmers have not had that. The other tree crops, we've not organized them much. But the truth is, they are growing. If you look at cashew, and if you look at the Ghana Export Promotion Authority's data, cashew is one of our highest earners when it comes to our non-traditional exports. In fact, I think it's the highest, earning us about $380-something million,
I see.
which is quite big. Look at how long we've invested in cocoa, right? And what cocoa gets us. And look at how much cashew is getting us in the last few decades. So they have a challenge. They need to be assured of pricing. They need to be assured of more support, and then they can go all out and invest more in cashew. So that has been the main problem for cashew farmers, how the prices are not assured and how the prices keep dropping and how nobody is really paying attention to cashew as much as we are paying attention to cocoa. If that is fixed, I believe the cashew farmers will be happier and you'll earn more from cashew.
So we had, I'm pulling a story from our business website, I believe in 2018, where we were told the Cashew Development Board will be established by the end of 2018 to regulate the cashew industry. And this was made, announced by the president. He made the announcement when he visited the Bono Afo region. And then the details of that is we're supposed to supply 2.7 million cashew seedlings to be planted on 13,000 hectares of land across the country. And in addition, 900 agricultural extension agents will be engaged to provide technical support to the cashew farmers. You have been monitoring that industry. Of course, we know the board hasn't been established yet, correct me if I'm wrong, but issues of about 2.7 million cashew seedlings to be planted over 13,000 hectares and all these things that were supposed to be done to improve the industry. What is the situation with that?
The truth is, this government launched a 10-year policy called the Cashew Development Plan. I remember very well in February 2018 that was launched, and then the Cashew Development Board as well, and then the tree crop bill, tree crop development bill. So a series of activities have been done for this particular area.
Okay.
The main concern of cashew farmers and the cashew industry is that it should move faster because every year we miss in implementing fully some of the things. We lose a lot of money. And I was referring to the Ghana Export Promotion Authority. In fact, it's mentioned on their website that cashew is one of our highest earners when it comes to non-traditional exports.
Okay.
And if you look at the cashew industry as well, the value chain can have cashew wine, because this is what is happening.
I've actually tried this cashew wine.
The sad part of cashew production is that the nuts, the hard nut, that is the main element in cashew that is sold in this country.
Yeah.
The fruit, which is about 70 to 80% of the mass of the cashew, we usually throw away.
Yeah.
Now, if you are fertilizing the soil, if you are carrying out any agronomic practices on your cashew farm, it's supposed to ensure you get a big fruit that will give you a big nut. So the fertilizers also go into the fruit production. Yeah. So in essence, we are losing inputs because you are throwing away the fruits. And if you are able to have and implement the cashew development plan very well and invest more in this particular area and create opportunities and incentives for people to invest, we can use cashew to produce ethanol, that is alcohol, for the beverage production industry, cashew wine. There are so many other byproducts of cashew, even animal feed. So they've not seen that speed with the implementation. That's where but the truth is some work has been done. The 10-year plan was launched. The bill is being worked on, and a couple of other things being done in the industry, but it's not moving as fast as people want. In fact, I have a copy of the Tree Crops Authority Act in front of me, and it says a lot about what is to be done for the sector, and the farmers want it to be sped up. Like we had fast track high courts back then. We sped up justice
delivery. Fast track cashew sector things. Okay, right. Let's move to cocoa. Cocoa, quite a lot happening there. What are they promising, and what does it look like in terms of implementation?
Cocoa is getting a lot of promises. One, cocoa farmers are getting free healthcare, which is one of the big promises. Free fertilizer for cocoa farmers, more inputs for cocoa farmers and strengthening the cocoa industry. We're also told of infrastructure for cocoa growing areas, electricity and related matters for cocoa growing areas. So the cocoa farmers are also going to get their premium sorted when it comes to health insurance. And cocoa processing for value addition. The NDC government says they will ensure the processing of at least 50% of cocoa beans. Now, we are doing close to 900,000 metric tons, right? Now, the government says that they are going to process at least 50% of cocoa beans in the country, which is about 500,000 metric tons. Now, this is welcome news because this government also has a similar target of raising the production. And if you are able to raise cocoa value addition in the country, it means Ghana is going to earn more. Because at the moment, if you look at the cocoa breakdown, if you take every 10 pounds or $10 spent in the cocoa industry, we get less than 2 pounds or $2. Right? The processing, like Switzerland, they've not grown even one tree of cocoa, but they are earning so much because they are doing a lot of value addition. So that is welcome news for the industry if we're able to implement and execute.
For cocoa. We've spoken about the free fertilizer. They are pushing again the annual increment in the cocoa producer price, pension scheme for cocoa farmers, and then of course the issue of cocoa roads, which when this government came into power, they did an auditing of the cocoa roads, but they are saying that they are going to resume all abandoned cocoa road projects and also pay all contractors whose certificates have not been honored by this government.
The cocoa roads issue is one of the big issues, Vivian. And in fact, I'm looking at an audit of cocoa roads, and a lot of them were abandoned. In fact, in my own village, they put a signage there that this road is a cocoa road.
Okay.
I go there, no action. I go there a year later, no action. 2 years later, the signage was down. 3 years later, I went there and somebody was removing the signage to go and use as firewood.
Are you kidding me?
Yes, that's the point. And we've played a lot of cocoa politics and cocoa road politics in this country. No government and no political party should be allowed to make a promise on cocoa without giving us any better roadmap. I'm saying this because the cocoa areas are not just for cocoa. If you look at them closely, areas cocoa grow very well are areas any other thing also grows very well. So when we give the promise that we'll do cocoa roads and we do not execute very well, and these areas have problems, it affects how food distribution is also done and food marketing is done to help us. So any government that comes, look, this I took the current senior minister on the City Breakfast Show, that the government said they were doing an audit of the cocoa roads. After months of doing the audits, where are the results? We should be straightforward and honest with whatever we find on some of these things, because it's not just about those rural areas and some of the urban areas that got cocoa roads. It's about every other thing that has got to do with our Greek space. Go to the Western region, which is now the leading producer of cocoa. The Western region is also the leading producer of a lot of the staples that we eat. But the roads are in a terrible shape. Go to parts of the Brunahafo region. Go to parts of the Eastern region. And if you look at the cocoa production figures, and Vivian, give me the chance to run you through cocoa production. Now, when Ghana started producing and recording cocoa figures properly in 1947, that's as far back. That's the farthest I can give you data on cocoa production. Ashanti region was the leader in cocoa production. Brunahafo wasn't anywhere. We're not producing cocoa there. Central region was also not contributing, and we're doing 210,000 metric tons. Fast forward, you see areas like the Western region producing so much cocoa. Practically leading the pack. Now, Western region is doing 453,000 metric tons of cocoa, leading all the other regions. In fact, if you put all the other regions combined, that's when they get close to Western region. But go and look at the state of the cocoa roads in the Western region. So, cocoa road promises and politics should not be left within the manifesto. And the leading political parties should always know that any mistake they make with implementing and executing these projects actually affects their targets, overall targets for the other food crops and the other segments of agric. So they should step up the game and deal with these issues.
Okay. Premix fuel. Premix fuel has popped up. Not a lot of literature there, but it says the NDC government will hand over the management of premix fuel to premix committees under the supervision of landing beach committees as established by the Fisheries Management Act and ensure affordability and availability for fishing communities. The premix discussion is a big political discussion.
Yeah.
It's people along the coast actually look at the premix situation and determine who should stay or who should get out of government. This is the NDC's position on what they intend to do. Your thoughts on this?
It's an interesting thought. Premix. Why did we have need for premix? Because our fishermen at a point had to go farther out to sea to get a catch. Why did that happen? Because for a very long time we were not sustainably managing our fishing resources to ensure that our farmers do not have to struggle to get their regular catch.
Yeah.
Why? Because we've allowed all sorts of illegal activities to happen in our high seas. Why? Because we derelicted our duty as a state. Dereliction of duty of the states to properly manage our fisheries and our fishing resources. And the same thing happens in the timber industry. Let me give you an example. In 2011, the fishing sector grew by negative, so it decreased growth, negative 8.7%. Forestry and logging, negative 14%. Then it came to 9.1, dropped to 5.7, negative 5.6 in 2004, came to 4.3, 5.7, and 11.7. And if you look at this growth, and if you talk to the fishermen, pair trawling was a big deal over the past decade. We've dealt with that. Cycle is a big deal in the fisheries sector. We've dealt with that, and so many other things. And also the issue to do with our fish stock. Last 2 years, one of the biggest issues that the Ministry of Aquaculture had to deal with was the close season.
Yeah, close season, yes.
Because government wanted to do it, the fishermen said no. If you did it, we will not have any form of livelihood back and forth. There had to be some agreement to do it.
Yeah.
We've not protected Ghana's oceans at all. There are issues that have affected fisheries. Galamsey has affected fisheries, but people are not linking it. When you put all sorts of chemicals in your river bodies and it empties out into the sea, it affects the habitat where the fish will come and spawn. That is come and lay eggs and produce new. So it's affected. Sun winning at our coastlines has been affected. So some of our natural harbors where fishermen could easily just go and put their canoes. Now we've had to invest a lot in, what do you call it? Coastal sea defense shields. We're investing in small harbors. But previously we didn't really require those things because the environment, the natural environment created spaces for those things. On top of that, we have not improved the industry when it comes to taking us to the next level. Look at Japan, look at China, look at the US, look at all these countries which are doing big time fisheries. They invested in the shipping industry. So Japan is one of the, I think Japan is the leading fish building country. So their fishermen get better machinery, better trawlers, and all these things. Our fishermen are still going into the bush. They go and cut a tree, carve it into a canoe. Then we put an outboard motor on it, which the government consistently buys for them, and premix fuel. Premix is a great thing, but we must aspire for greater. Better fish stock in our oceans, better ways of managing the fisheries. The NDC is promising other things, which has to do with storage and related matters. It's great, but you can have your storage, you can have your premix in place, you can have your outboard motors. If there is nothing to be caught in our coastal waters,
There's no point.
They will still have to go further,
Yeah.
and there will be no point. If we do not fight the illegalities happening in our oceans, the cycle, the petroleum and all those things, there will be no point. And the other threats of piracy also in our systems.
Which is it keeps entrenching itself.
Yes, we need to fight that, because that's also an issue coming. The piracy is not just happening to those in the oil sector. Fisheries are also at risk. So we need to pay attention to all these things. The Sustainable Development Goals have spelled out a lot of the things we need to do. And Ghana is also a signatory to so many things, but the implementation we are not doing. So premix, great, give us premix, but beyond the premix, let's protect our lagoons. Look at the Sakumana Lagoon. And all the governments have failed in protecting our lagoons and the estuaries and all. Look, if the Sakumana Lagoon is the way it is, if the Densu Lagoon is the way it is, the Peshi estuary is the way it is, how will fish come and spawn and reproduce in our waters for fishermen to catch a lot?
They'll run away. So marine and that sector, I'll just go through a few things they want to do. For example, they want to strengthen quality assurance and inspection of feed stuff used by fish farmers, as well as control and surveillance of fish pests and disease by the ministry in collaboration with appropriate faculties at the universities and other research institutes. Also implements the fish health policy. Also scientifically enhance the observer program to properly administer the law on pair trawling and the vessel monitoring system. And also they want to review the closed season for all trawlers. I don't know what exactly they will be looking at in terms of
So the closed season, there are two things.
Yes.
There is the Ghana Industrial Trawlers Association, and there is the Artisanal Fishermen Association.
Yeah.
The industrial trawlers have bigger vessels which can go further into sea. The artisanal trawlers don't have bigger vessels which go further into sea. The industrial trawlers also say they catch different type of fish. The artisanal fishermen say they catch different. So at a point, they were all asking for different times for their close season, because their main catch or their main business were a bit different. So that was a big conversation and a big issue that came up. So that's why they are saying that. But a bit about fish feed and standardization of fish farming and those things, I think it's key. Because I feel that one of the main ways we can feed the country when it comes to protein through fish is aquaculture and fish farming. You remember recently there was a story in the Volta Lake area where there was this fish farm run by some Chinese that had some contamination, and we had to bury a lot of fish, and people had to go and excavate the fish that we had buried. A whole lot of things happened. But CSIR, the Water Research Institute here in Ghana, which is a government agency, they have done extensive research into fish. In fact, the feed stock, the production stock that we've had and seen over the years that a lot of people are using for fish farming, they produce a lot of that. We need to resource that institution. When we say we'll do these things, we should not do all these things without involving our scientific and research institutions that have been leading the work. What happens is that they do the work, we take the thing, do something, and we leave them to rot. So you go to CSIR and you look at the funding they got for their research, and it's almost non-existent from the government coffers. Government pays salaries, electricity, a few goods and services, and that's just about that. Let's resource these institutions. They have the brains and the knowledge to help us move forward. Let's not mention these things and leave them as procurement deals, because we see this a lot. So outboard motors, then we'll go to Japan and go and buy a lot of Yamaha or whatever outboard motors. This and that. Let's also use research and knowledge to improve the lot of our various industries, so that Ghanaian knowledge and Ghanaian research will drive Ghana's development. Okay,
since you're talking about the fingerlings and all that, they want to support the youth in cage construction, breeding and management technologies for tilapia, shrimps and mudfish. Also support and encourage the youth to engage in commercial cage culture on our lakes and rivers, and also support the production of fingerlings, and then train the youth in the construction of ponds for fish farming.
I think this is fantastic. I bought mudfish last week from an area close to
Where you came to
the Gulf House.
Clap for yourself.
Now, Vivian, the big mudfish is like from here to here, right? 90 cities. 90 cities. That's how much they sell it at the restaurant. Now, this is the interesting thing. They buy the mudfish from production, sometimes for 30 cities, right? So, and if you look at the fish we eat a lot of imported fish here. But the way we develop the tilapia industry for banco and tilapia to be the norm, and fried yam and tilapia to be the norm, we should develop some of those other